Hey there, everybody. It's Dave here and Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers. And today, we're going to be talking about everything seems to be in turmoil on the Minnesota Vikings. We're starting with Jordan Addison's latest arrest. And is it the final nail in the coffin for his time in purple? We'll ask that question. His off-field issues seem to be piling up fast. And it's putting Kevin O'Connell and adofo-mensah in one heck of a tough spot. Trade value tanked? We'll talk about it. Plus, we break down the end of the season pressers. Speaking of KOC and Kwesi, are they handing J.J. McCarthy the starting role in 2026? Hey, good questions. Now, KOC admitted during the presser that Mr. Pettine was retiring. And then we found out yesterday, Chris Kuper is out. We'll talk about those as well. And then, of course, our defensive coordinator, Brian Flores. What's happening with him? So don't miss this deep dive today. And then we'll finish up with the running backs as Darren looks ahead to what we want in 2026. So grab your horn, settle in, and let's get into it. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. And here we are once again. Darren, how are things in the Great White North?
Well, just fine, Dave. I didn't get arrested this week, so I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fine myself. It's a bit chilly down here, but that's okay. It is winter. I want to welcome everybody to the show. We got Chevy, we got Raymond, Anthony, Doc Proto is here, Peter is here. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning, Sunday morning, and we're going to move the show from now on to Sundays. We'll adjust the time accordingly, but there'll be no more Saturday shows until the season starts off again. This works better for Darren and I, and hopefully for you, since the game doesn't start till this afternoon. We got plenty of time.
We do.
Now, we're going to start off with theme 1. Makes better sense than starting off with theme 3.
Always does, yes.
And for theme 1, and as I scroll, Jordan Addison.
How was your week, Dave?
I didn't get arrested in the casino.
No. Yeah, this is kind of just starting with this just because last week on This Week in Vikings Land we touched on Jordan Addison situation because and that the Vikings had had to think pretty hard about Addison because he's into the fourth year of his rookie contract, so he's eligible for either an extension or the Vikings pick up his 5th-year option. And normally for a player who's been as productive as Jordan Addison was, particularly in his first 2 years, it would be a pretty easy decision for the Vikings to at least decide to pick up the 5th-year option. But we talked about how with his off-the-field issues, at this point last week, had 2 run-ins with the law, plus he'd been suspended for a quarter of the Browns game because he missed a walkthrough and we don't know why he didn't make it, but we made some guesses at the time about what that was. But so that made things difficult. That makes things difficult for the Vikings with the off the field stuff. How do you want to commit a lot of money and extra years to Jordan Addison when his off the field performance has been iffy at best. Well, the Vikings this week on Tuesday, we've learned that Addison's been arrested for misdemeanor trespassing at a casino in Tampa Bay. That's exactly the kind of news that the Vikings did not want to get from Jordan Addison. And you got to think at this point that completely takes extension, picking up the 50-year option off the table for the Vikings, I think. But with all of that, but it certainly it complicates things even more with Addison right now, and it puts the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, in a really tough spot about what to do with Addison, because, like I said, he's coming off a poor third year, although a lot of that was quarterback related, I believe. But his first 2 years again were very productive as the number 2 guy to Justin Jefferson, and it puts them in a tough spot. First off, roster wise, Dave, because this really throws a wrench into, I think, their plans for the wide receiver unit in 2026. We talked about this a few shows ago when Drew was on as well, but I think the plan for the Vikings was that you've got Justin Jefferson as the number 1 guy, of course. You're going to roll with Jordan Addison as number 2, just like he's been. You're probably letting go, with regrets, Jalen Nailor to free agency. And then I think that their plan was that Felton, who basically had a redshirt year this year as a rookie, would be sliding in, hopefully, to the number 3 role with the Vikings with a lot of development. And they probably would be acquiring a veteran as a little bit of added insurance in case Felton doesn't come along as fast, as well as they hope in the offseason. But I think that was the plan for the wide receiver room in 2026. Well, now what do you do, right? Because the chances are Jordan Addison, looking at the NFL's personal conduct policy, that Addison, again, he's had 3, if you're counting, he's now had 3 brushes with the law. He was the speeding ticket as a rookie. He had the, I forget what exactly the charge was, but it was a wet, reckless charge. He ended up pleading no contest to for, I think, aggravated, for alcohol use while driving a car. And now he's got the misdemeanor trespassing here at the casino, which is 2 of those are alcohol related. He's already been suspended 3 games last season under the NFL's personal conduct policy for the alcohol related arrest in 2024. When we know that the NFL, people who do this multiple times and it's alcohol related, the NFL usually they ramp up the suspension that you're giving, even if Addison is found innocent of the charges, and his legal representatives this week stated that they believe he's going to get exonerated. The NFL can still hand out suspensions even if you don't, you're found innocent of what you were charged with. And we've seen in cases when people get in trouble with the law multiple times, like say Pac-Man Jones, your suspensions keep on going up. When you look at the alcohol-related issues, somebody who's a repeat offender, it escalates. The NFL usually wants to make an example of these players and show Addison and the rest of the NFL that if you keep on doing this, we're going to increase the suspensions. You're going to pay for that. So Addison likely is looking at a suspension ranging from 4 to 8 games this second time around. I think it's going to probably land in the 5 to 6 game range, and that means that he's not going to be available even if the Vikings keep him to start the season for a significant amount of games. And that is an issue for the Vikings. And what do you do there, right? If you're not going to have him, you can't start the season with just Justin Jefferson and Felton as your 1 and 2. So what do the Vikings do now? Do they bring back Jalen Nailor because he's a known quantity and has been productive the past couple of seasons, and probably isn't going to cost a huge bundle, but he is going to cost more than he did last season? Do you try to find a veteran in free agency who could be the number 2? If you look at the wide receivers who are set to be free agents right now, it's not a very impressive list? Or do the Vikings look to go into the draft in 2026 and pick a wide receiver higher than they did last year when they picked Felton with their comp pick at the end of the third round? So, that really complicates the wide receiver room for the Vikings, and it's not something that they wanted to deal with. You're pretty set at wide receiver if Jordan Addison is healthy and available to you to start the season, and you've got Justin Jefferson as his running mate. Now, big questions on that. The other issue with this beyond the roster stuff, Dave, is just, if I'm right, and I think that the Vikings are done with Jordan Addison, he is pretty much torpedoed his trade value right now. When you look at, even if he hadn't got arrested this week, he had the 2 off-field incidents prior to that. And so any team looking to acquire or interested in acquiring Jordan Addison would know going into a year where he's eligible for either a contract extension or you got to pick up his 5th-year option. He was 1 off-the-field incident away from possibly facing NFL suspension again and not being available to them at the start of the 2026 season. So I think any team that would be approached or interested in trading for Addison is talented and as good as he's played, particularly in 2023 and 2024. I think they'd be demanding a discount from the Vikings for Jordan Addison. Normally, I think, again, with Addison's track record, even with the down year he had in 2025, I think you're probably, if you trade him, you can get a high 2nd-round pick for him before he got arrested this week. Now, a team looking to trade for him, he's very possibly going to get a 2nd suspension that's going to be more than the first one was. So, if you trade him at the start of the season, you might be not having him in your lineup for 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 games. That's not ideal. So I think the discount gets even more now if the Vikings try to trade for him. So with the fact that he's got potential another suspension looming, if you acquire him, also you have to make a decision on, do you extend him? Do you pick up his 5th-year option? If you don't, you're running the risk of just having him for not even a full season, and then he can leave in 2027 as a free agent. I don't know if the Vikings would get a 6th or 7th round pick for Jordan Addison right now if they trade him. And that would be, at that point, the Vikings are trading away your 23rd overall pick in the 2023 draft for like 10 cents on the dollar. That would be a horrible return, but it's got to be in play right now for the Vikings and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, as much as they'd hate to do that. Perhaps the best play here, Dave, if the Vikings feel they cannot trust Jordan Addison, and I think at this point they can't, you just don't know what he's going to do. Maybe their best play right now is you hold on to him. You deal with that suspension and realize that he's not going to be available for you at some point in the game, but you take that and then maybe look just before the trade deadline ends in 2026, you approach a team, you hope a team that's a contending team needs a wide receiver, needs a quality wide receiver, and then maybe you look at trading him midway through the season before the trade deadline ends, and maybe you get better compensation then for Addison, like maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick, than you would now if you traded him with all the off the field uncertainty with him. Either way, it's not a great situation for the Vikings with Jordan Addison, and we didn't want to be here, but we are here. I do really feel that Addison's probably played his last game as a Viking based on what's happened here.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. All we know was he was arrested for trespassing on private property, which he was asked to leave and numerous times, and eventually they came in and took him out. Now, whether he was drinking or not is up to speculation. It has not been reported by a known source to be the fact. It's all hearsay. Okay. Well, we do know that the NFL does get a second whack at a player, even if the courts say, no, dismissed. they're going to look at this and they are going to determine, was there alcohol involved? Did it cause a problem? Blah, blah, blah. Does it apply to the players' agreement for the personnel policy, which as I read it, I think it does, but it's going to be interesting. And then they can determine beyond there if they're going to suspend him for how long. And it probably will be more than the 3 games last year, which of course is. But anyways, now if we trade him, the question is, what can we get? You're thinking a 6th rounder, something like that, a low day 3 pick. Okay. My question and what I think Kwesi's going to think is, well, if we hold on to him for 2026, yes, there could be a team that's suddenly desperate and wants him, trade bigger value. But even if his contract expires, you're going to have a compensation pick depending on how much salary he gets. And he's a 1st-round draft pick. And you got to remember, coaches across the league always love 1st-round draft picks. They'll figure, I can fix him. And they'll bring him in and give him a decent salary. That's generally how it works. Laquan Treadwell's still playing, even though he stunk, and he wasn't a problem child. And we know that Jordan Addison is a much better wide receiver than Laquan ever was. But it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this plays out. I have no idea. He could be traded. He could be dropped. He could be, as in released. He could be, all sorts of things could happen. We just don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. It's just a shame that we have to.
Yes. But I just don't see that I don't feel it's workable for the Vikings, considering they don't know who their quarterback is right now. And if your quarterback is J.J. McCarthy, you'd want as many weapons as possible for him, even though that didn't work out really well for him this year. But I just don't think that, if the suspension comes down, we don't know what it is. If it's like, again, 4, 5, 6 games, even more, that's the start of the season. You're just not going to be without Addison. I just feel that the Vikings offense, that's not a very ideal situation for them to have. And they might be looking at moving on. And then they looked at moving on from Addison because it's too much of a headache anymore. And they're not going to get a full season or even close out of him in 2026 anyway. But again, there's economics at play here. There's optics at play as like, what do you really want to take the heat of trading him if you have to trade him for 10 cents on the dollar or whatever it is. So like you said, the comp pick thing which is something that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Vikings look very closely at. That comes into play too on whether they keep him or not. But he's run out of chances. I think after you've had 4 incidents now with him, and he keeps on saying he's very sorry each time, and he keeps on doing dumb stuff each time after he says he's sorry. And at what point do you just cut bait and say, not our problem anymore? I think the Vikings have reached that have reached that, even though Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was very supportive of him in the presser this week. But I would expect him to do that. But I also don't think that the Vikings can trust him anymore. And if you can't trust a guy, you got to get him off your roster, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to find out. It's going to be interesting. So, but
it always is around here.
Yes, it's Minnesota. And if this was 20 years ago, and you're speeding 100 plus on I-94, that was no big deal. But it's not. Times have changed. It's a big deal. So it is what it is. Now, on to theme 2. Oops. There we go. This week in Vikings land. And this one's going to be a long one, folks. So buckle in.
That's right. Well, a lot of stuff going on, so
Yes.
it is long. But the first thing we're going to get to is just the Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah pressers, which were this week, and those are always an event for Vikings fans and media because it's particularly for the media because it's the last chance probably for about a month or more that you're going to get a chance. You're going to get a chance to ask Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah questions about what the plans are for 2026 and building the Vikings roster. Because unless something major happens, and we hope that if anything major happens, it's going to be good news, not bad news. But anyway, so these are always, so these things are always must watch for Vikings fans and media, the end of year presser. However, as usual, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah at these pressers, they said a lot, but didn't say much or very much controversial, certainly anything controversial at well. So you've probably, a lot of people who are watching the show have already watched the pressers and you've got your own opinions. But, the first major thing for me is that no commitment to J.J. McCarthy to be the starter in 2026 was made by Kevin O'Connell or Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. They certainly, again, were supportive of J.J. McCarthy. They feel he improved during the 2025 season. They sounded excited, particularly Kevin O'Connell, to work with him in the offseason and to help him improve and be the quarterback they think he can be. But again, they certainly said nothing that he is going to go into the offseason as the unchallenged starter for 2026. That he's going to, it was pretty clear that he's going to have to earn the starting job in 2026, which was not the case in 2025. And is that the right way to go about it? Absolutely. And actually, I would have been very worried if Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah had got up there and said, J.J. McCarthy, we're running it back with him as a starter, no competition at all. Like, based on what we saw in his first year, there has to be competition because that was not a level of quarterback play that the Vikings can win with consistently. So there you have it. I think that, I think I was talking about this last week, but I really feel that this isn't a great way for the first year to start for J.J. McCarthy. But I do think that some honest conversations with him, that he's the type of personality who is going to take he's been told that he's going to compete, and he's going to throw 100% of his effort into that and try to be the quarterback they want him to be. Let's see where that goes. We don't know who the veteran competition is going to be. That's another interesting part of the Vikings offseason, how that all works out. So there's that. That was the big thing. Not a whole lot else, but one other thing that did catch my ear, and I'm sure it caught yours as well, Dave, is that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talked about. He mentioned the offensive line in particular, and how they really, particularly at the tackle position, they have to be mindful about having good quality depth there, particularly at the tackle spots for Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. Both of those guys missed multiple games in 2025. O'Neill's getting to 30 years old, where maybe the nicks and bumps and bruises are catching up to him a bit more, and missing games could be, a game here and there could be more of an annual occurrence. We know Christian Darrisaw really struggled to get back after his ACL and MCL surgery to repair the ACL and MCL injuries he sustained in 2024. And we also know that the Vikings offense didn't really function very well when those guys were not in the starting lineup, because the drop-off from Darrisaw and O'Neill to Justin Skule and Walter Rouse and Blake Brandel is quite steep. So Kwesi Adofo-Mensah again recognized, hey, we need to have guys that when either O'Neill or Darrisaw are out, or regrettably both of them are out, we need guys to come in and play at a high level. And that gets me thinking. The Vikings have generally, for their offensive line depth, we have seen them, they go the veteran journeyman route, or they're picking guys in the 6th or 7th round, taking flyers on those. This might be a time to watch out for in this draft. I wouldn't say in the first round, but you're looking at maybe second round, third round, where they target like a promising, not one of the top shelf left tackles, but a promising left tackle who's got great starter traits. In the second or third round, somebody who can come in and might be more ready to play right away and play at a much better level than, say, a Walter Rouse can or a Blake Brandel can. Just something to watch out for in the upcoming draft in 2026. And we'll be talking about this when we get to the offensive line positional analysis in a couple of weeks too.
Yes, we will, without a doubt. But I'm going to get into more offensive line stuff here momentarily.
Oh, you love this.
Oh, I do. During the presser, Kevin O'Connell acknowledged that Mike Pettine, who has been the assistant head coach since 2022 when Kevin came on, and then has been coaching outside linebackers for 2023 and 2024, is retiring. Mm-hmm. Now, Mike Pettine, okay, good. His value is to Kevin O'Connell, though. And he called him a buddy, a friend, all that other stuff. Well, we wish Mike all the best in his retirement, and he moves on. So
he's only 59.
I know. But we're going to find out if that assistant head coach was open for a reason, i.e. B-flow, or not that you can't have multiple assistant head coaches, or what was the reason behind it? Because the outside linebackers seem to do pretty good with Grenard and Van Ginkel and
Dallas Turner this season.
Dallas Turner, yep. I don't know, but we'll find out. But then yesterday, we get a tweet. Chris Kuper, our offensive line coach, is no longer with the team. His contract expired. Minnesota Vikings chose not to re-sign him, I think for good reason. But he is no longer with the team. Now, Alec Lewis yesterday wrote a great piece over on The Athletic. He also had an emergency podcast he did about it, which got into it even further. But Chris Kuper, this was his first job as a offensive line coach, the guy, not just an assistant O-line coach, but the guy. And the pass blocking over those 4 years has been horrible. It's been 32nd for 2 years, 31st for 1 year, and I think 25th. And that's crazy. That's bad. Even with all the injuries, that's bad. Now, my beef with Kuper was how he taught the guys to block. Well, this season, they've gone through 25 different line changes, combinations. Some have worked, some have not. Can't keep people healthy, i.e., half the line, 4/5 of the line, and can't keep healthy. But it still didn't overall improve. Now, what did improve, we'll get to here shortly, is the run game. Mm-hmm. But one of the reasons why people were calling for Cooper's head, and I did last year, was he doesn't seem to develop guys on a consistent basis to outstanding levels of play. Yes, we get some good draft choices, and they work. But we had Garrett Bradbury, and Garrett Bradbury had a very serviceable season in New England this year. Ed Ingram had, by him, a great season down in Houston. Ezra Cleveland's still a well-respected starter in Jacksonville. And even Dalton Reisner had a good season this year with the Bungles. So that goes to prove my point. You go through all these guys and you can't pull what's best from them. And it's the coach's job to pull the best out of their people and teach them that. But we'll see. Now, this year, we improved in the running game. Reason being, we had hired this man, Keith Carter, as the assistant O-line coach to work with Chris Kuper and to work on the run game. Well, there was improvement this year. They block better for the run. Now, Chris Kuper is gone. Most likely, Keith Carter is gone. Supposedly, according to Alec Lewis, his contract expired as well. So we're going to go into a mode where we're looking for new offensive line head coaches. There's a list of them that would work. I'm sure that some of them would work out just fine, but it's going to be an interesting offseason to see who KOC selects as the O-line coach. John Gruden talked about the most important coach a head coach can hire is his offensive line coach. Because without a successful offensive line, the run game and pass blocking fail. Well, if you look at the 4 years Kevin O'Connell's been head coach and our offensive stats, they've not been great, no matter which ones you look at. DVOA, whichever ones you want to look at, they're not good. And Kevin O'Connell is supposed to be this offensive brainchild. Well, he needs to hire the proper offensive line head coach, in my opinion. And I thought the news yesterday was welcomed by most fans, and especially me. I was quite happy over it. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Dave, I felt that, Davey, I'm drinking water, not vodka. At least no vodka yet. I'm not a big partaker of the potato water anyway, but Dave, when you sent me that tweet from Ben Gessling saying that Kuper was gone, I just pictured you smiling from ear to ear.
Yes.
Because you've not been a Kuper fan at all. But yeah, that's kind of the first shuffling of the Vikings often assistant coaches, and we'll see where things go. They also lost Hutchings to Cal, who took the Cal defensive coordinator position, and Hutchings was one of their defensive assistants as well. So they've lost a few of their of the assistant coaching guys at this point in time, and of course there's another assistant that we're waiting to see what he's going to do as well, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Yes, we are. B-Flow.
Yeah, just with the latest on the Brian Flores situation, I think everybody knows he was pretty busy this week. He's already interviewed for the Baltimore Ravens head coaching job, and he also we learned that the Steelers have requested to interview him as well for their head coaching job, which sort of surprisingly came up open this week when Mike Tomlin stepped down. So 2 head coaching jobs, plus he also interviewed this week for the defensive coordinator job in Washington. The head coaching stuff, Dave, if the Vikings were to lose Brian Flores to a head coaching position, it's not great, but that's something that is sort of inevitable when you have a really good coordinator. Like almost all of the real good coordinators move on to be a head coach at some point in time. And Brian Flores made it very clear when he came here that he still wanted to be a head coach. That's an aspiration for him. So, and if he were to leave as a head coach, I don't think he's going to get those jobs because of the lawsuit, but it's still possible. But, if he were to get a head coaching job, Dave, at least that shows that, when he came here, he got the job done that we wanted to get done, which was that he turned around the Vikings defense. He made the Vikings a top 10 unit. He made the Vikings defense a unit that teams really did not want to play against. And that's certainly what's happened with Brian Flores. He's done a great job here. So when coordinators do a great job, they usually move on to be a head coach coaching. That's just the reality of it. But if Brian Flores moves in a lateral move as a coordinator for another team, that's going to be a lot harder for me to swallow, Dave, because the Vikings have made it clear. Kevin O'Connell in the last two pressers has made it clear, I want Brian Flores back. This week, he said, we've been trying to get Brian Flores back since the offseason. But you can't make somebody sign on the dotted line if they don't want to. And so far, Brian Flores has not done that. And we don't know why that is. Is it money? Is it money and prestige? Is it because he doesn't like the quarterback situation the Vikings are facing right now and he thinks that hurts his head coaching opportunities in the future? We just don't know. But the Vikings want him. They haven't been able to get it done. And if they don't get it done and he moves to a coordinator position somewhere else, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Wolves are going to have some explaining to do because fans are going to be irate if that happens.
Yes, they will. Hey, it could be power over defensive draft picks. It could be all sorts of reasons why it could happen, but it has not yet, and that has fans worried. Now, would Washington be a good fit? They obviously have the quarterback. They've got ownership that's willing to spend money up the wazoo. They're going to be building a new stadium. It's, it could be that point. They've got a big market just like Dallas does. There was the talk, at the beginning of the Dallas wants him as a DC.
Haven't heard much about that lately.
Nothing's come out of that lately. You're correct. There was the talk of head coach for the Raiders. What a great fit. Tom Brady would want to bring him back. Well, nothing's materialized from that either. So we'll see. I don't think he's going to, he's interviewed for the Ravens job, and now he's interviewing for the Steelers job. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen.
Not in head coaching, but again, certainly if you're a team looking for a coordinator, he's number one on your list, probably in a lot of cases, unless you're an owner who was really worried about how he worked, about the whole Miami situation and how that played out. Or
you're an owner of a team that's being sued, like the Giants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we know he ain't going there.
But we'll find out eventually. It's just hopefully sooner rather than later. But Anthony says he'll be back. He has faith. Hey, I hope you're right, Anthony.
Yes.
You're right. Now, to some good news of the week.
Yeah, we touch on Will Reichard, and last week we talked a little bit about the fact that he'd been selected, and deservedly so, as the NFC All-Pro kicker. And Dave, you and I think he's the best kicker in the NFL. He had the best season last year of any NFL kicker. But the reason I bring it up is that, as deserved as it is, we know kickers, almost all kickers, go into slumps. They get into funks where at a certain point in the season, you don't know when it's going to happen. They just get the yips and they start missing a lot more kicks from distances that they normally make. And a lot of times those missed kicks lead to losses for the team that they're kicking for. And we have seen multiple cases where teams have had a really quality kicker. They thought he gets into the slump one season and they don't stick with that guy and they release him and move on to somebody else. The Vikings have done it a few times themselves. I bring this up because Will Reichard, he had kind of a little mini slump in his rookie year, but I think that was all injury related for him. His quad just wasn't right when he came back, and it affected his technique and the amount of distance he could get on the ball and all that sort of stuff. But we hope it doesn't happen. But Will Reichard right now looks like the answer to the Vikings place kicker woes, which have been ongoing for a number of years. He just never misses a kick, right? It's almost always up the middle. Extra points, field goals, doesn't matter what distance, where they're from. what time of the game it is, whether there's pressure, it's a pressure-filled kick or not. He's money. But again, kickers at some point in time, they have a struggle. They get the yips. They have a slump. We hope it doesn't happen with Will Reichard, but it probably will happen at some point in time. And if that happens, the Vikings got to remember this all-pro season this year and what Will Reichard has done since he's been a Viking. And remember, stay the course with Will Reichard. He's really good. Don't panic if he misses a few extra more kicks than he normally has. And maybe it's cost you a game or two, but he's a really good kicker. He's going to get out of it. Don't junk him and go to a new guy and then be searching for your kicker for another 10 years. The Vikings did it with Daniel Carlson. You just had him up there. A little bit different situation in 2018. You had a Super Bowl contender, we thought, with the Vikings, and he missed 3 of his first 4 kicks, and they got rid of him. He's been just fine ever since.
During this game against Green Bay, in Green Bay.
The whole slump situation brings to mind, Mason Crosby with the Green Bay Packers. This guy kicked 16 seasons for the Green Bay Packers. Mason Crosby did, but and he was a real good kicker there for a long time. But in 2018 and 2021, he really struggled. In 2018, he made only 81% of his kicks. He missed 7 kicks that year. In 2021, he only made 73.5% of his kicks. He missed 9 field goals that year. Fans wanted him out. They wanted him to move on. The Green Bay had good teams those years, teams that were Super Bowl contenders. But the Packers, and I give them credit for this, they stuck with the plan. They realized that Mason Crosby had been a good kicker before. He didn't just suddenly lose it. He's going to be a good kicker again, and they stuck with him through the downs in his career, which weren't very many, and they got 16 years out of him. I want the Vikings to get 16 years out of Will Reichard. So again, if he has that slump, and it's going to happen at some point in time, we think, stay the course. Stay with Will the Thrill, because he is the real deal at kicker. We have seen that for 2 seasons.
I agree, without a doubt. And to move on too quickly from an outstanding kicker, and he is by far the best we've seen in a long, long time. You got to stick with him. So, best draft pick of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah.
Oh, boy.
All right. Then we go to the next topic.
And final topic
week of Vikings land, Adam Thielen.
Yeah, I want to finish things off by talking about Adam Thielen, who announced his retirement after the Steelers got bounced from the playoffs by Houston on Monday night. We knew this was his last season anyway, but it was made official after the Steelers got eliminated, and of course Thielen signed with the Steelers after the Vikings released him. A little late this season. We know Thielen's second act with the Vikings didn't go very well. So it is, but I still want to appreciate the player that Adam Thielen was and the career he had when he was at his best. And Adam Thielen was like a very important guy for the Vikings when they got him, because if folks remember, the Vikings have a long history of great receivers, very good receivers, and receivers that can make plays and were receivers that teams had to account for. Gene Washington, John Gilliam from the late 60s, early 70s, Sammy White, Ahmad Rashad. Then you got Anthony Carter. Then you got Chris Carter, Jake Reed, and then Randy Moss. Just a long history of really, really good receivers, and some who are in the Hall of Fame. But after the Vikings traded Randy Moss in 2005, we went through a long drought where we just could not. We lost the magic touch at wide receiver, right? Troy Williamson was a disaster. Sidney Rice had one. Sidney Rice had one really good year, and then couldn't stay healthy and ended up in Seattle and never really did anything. Percy Harvin was great, but He fought himself. He fought everybody on the team. He had mental health issues, and he ended up running himself out of town. He was kind of the
migraine as well.
And, he's kind of one of the guys that, what could have been players. So the guys we drafted just never panned out for the most part. And then the guys we brought in from outside the organization as free agents or through trades, they weren't any better. Like you look at Bernard Berrien, Bobby Wade, Mike Wallace, Greg Jennings, all those guys just didn't cut it for the Vikings when the Vikings got them. But then, you get Adam Thielen, you sign him as an undrafted rookie free agent in 2013. He doesn't make the team, but then you sign him to the practice squad. He gradually develops, and along with him and drafting Stefan Diggs in the 5th round, by 2016, we had a 4-year run where Thielen and Diggs were as good a wide receiver duo as there was in the NFL. And again, they brought back the magic. The Vikings got the magic touch back somewhat by accident at wide receiver. So, I have a lot of respect for Adam Thielen, the way he went, where he started and where he ended up, the career he had, the guy he was off the field. And I'm going to miss watching him play because he was a very good player for us and a great competitor as well.
I agree. Now, T-Bass says he does not deserve the Ring of Honor. T-Bass, I agree with you. The guys that are in the Ring of Honor are generally Hall of Famers. He didn't get there. So he had a good, very, very good career. Just at, 4th on the Vikings all-time receiving list or something like that. But we'll see. All right. That's it. The end of Theme 2. What comes after Theme 2?
Theme 3, Dave.
Mm-hmm. This one we're going to be looking at running backs.
We started last week our annual positional analysis of the Vikings, looking into what 2026 will bring for the various positions on the Vikings football team. And last week we did the quarterbacks. This week we're going with the running backs. Dave, and you got the man up there, Aaron Jones, and we're going to start with him because there's a question about what his future what his future holds with the Vikings and in the NFL. And he is signed next season as a Viking, but looking at Aaron Jones, I thought this year he was still effective out there. And when you look at Aaron Jones, great teammate, great leader, highly, highly respected in the locker room and across the NFL, great off the field guy, also great, always been a great pass catcher, willing pass blocker. And again, he's had a great career in the NFL. However, this year, he's 31 years old right now. He missed 5 games. He's also coming off a year where he had his lowest yards per carry average of his career, 4.2. And Pro Football Focus didn't think much of him either. He was one of the lowest graded starting running backs that they had. I don't think at 31, those stats are going to get any better. Plus, he's got a salary cap hit of $14.5 million coming into this 2026 season. So when you look at his age, his production last year, and the salary cap hit, that ain't happening. And you can also, if you cut him before June 5th, yes, there's going to be a dead cap hit of about $6.6 million or something, but the Vikings also get $7.7 million in salary cap relief. So I don't think there's any question that Aaron Jones has also played his last game as a Viking. He won't be back next year, I don't think, because of those factors: age, a little bit of declining performance, and the salary cap issue. Could they maybe look at bringing him back under a big extended, a big restructured contract with him understanding that he's going to be mostly a third down back, possibly, but I don't know. The Vikings got to just get younger and more explosive here. So I don't think he's back. Jordan Mason certainly will be back. I thought he had a really, really good first year for the Vikings. He led the team in rushing yards, led the team in rushing touchdowns. He was exactly as advertised. Really tough runner. Great at creating yards after contact. He almost never has a negative run. Every time you give him the ball, he's going to at least get a yard or two, even if there's nothing blocked. So I really liked him. Again, I thought he was exactly what we thought he was going to be when they brought him in. Vikings, though, didn't really use him very much as a receiver. Aaron Jones did most of that. Xavier Scott as well. Looks like he can catch the ball, but they just didn't use him very much in that. And that was a big question when the Vikings traded for him, was that he was really untested as a receiver out of the backfield. And that is important in the NFL and in the Vikings offense. And also Pro Football Focus rated him as one of the worst pass blocking running backs in the NFL. That's an issue. If you're going to be a full-time running back, you got to be able to pass block or you're going to get your quarterback killed. And the indications are Jordan Mason is not very good at that right now. So that kind of limits him. He doesn't look to me, because of those factors, that he could be your bell cow back Dave, where you're giving him the ball 250 times a season. I think he's best suited in a running back committee like he was this year. And I think that's the way the Vikings view him as well. He's a clear power back, Dave. So I think you're going to need a little bit of lightning to his thunder in 2026. The other guys on the roster, Ty Chandler, don't think we have to say much about him. He won't be back. He just never progressed after 2023, promising 2023. He was injured almost all of last season. He's 27 years old, so he's actually older than Jordan Mason. I just don't see him back. I think he's going to go elsewhere and try to get a start there. Xavier Scott, I certainly think that he'll be in contention for a roster spot. Kind of liked him this year, Dave. He showed that he's really good as a pass catcher. That's to be expected, though, because he was a wide receiver in college. Running as a running back, he didn't get a lot of carries, 32, but he didn't do much with those carries. I think what we saw in real games against starting NFL defensive players, he just didn't quite have that juice, that little something that shows that he could be a dependable and effective runner at the NFL level. Sometimes you can watch a guy in a game and you can just tell the wiggle, the explosiveness that isn't quite there at the NFL level. And that's what I felt with Xavier Scott. Again, a guy who's nice to have as a third down back receiving option, but you're not going to really use him as a runner. So I think he's going to compete for a roster spot in 2026. Do I think is he guaranteed a roster spot? No. So I think with that, what are the Vikings going to potentially do with their running back room? One, again, we just talked a little bit about it, is I thought the running game was pretty effective this year. Fullback wise, I almost forgot about this, but there's a question there, Dave. CJ Ham, his contract has expired. Sounded like in the regular season finale, he is done. Question is, are the Vikings going to use a roster spot on a fullback in their running back room? Which is a good question, because we don't know who the quarterback again is going to be in 2026, and that quarterback is going to determine what kind of offense the Vikings use and what their focus is. You saw at the end of last year, Kevin O'Connell really, really leaned on CJ Ham to be an extra pass protector for JJ McCarthy and the quarterbacks they had out there. In 4 of the last 5 games, CJ Ham played 20 or more offensive snaps, which is a big increase compared to what he'd been playing in games in the past, since Kevin O'Connell joined the Vikings in 2022.
They really money for it too.
Yeah. They really trusted CJ Ham again to be that extra blocker and provide more protection for blitzers and that sort of thing for JJ McCarthy. And he was really, really good at it, I think. If the Vikings have JJ McCarthy, if he's the one that wins the quarterback competition this offseason, then I think Kevin O'Connell would really look strongly at bringing a fullback in, but it's not going to be CJ Ham, so it's going to have to be somebody else. And just as a note, Patrick Ricard in your picture there is a free agent. He's one of those guys who's well known and well renowned for a run blocker and a pass blocker, and he's like 300 plus pounds. He's also 32, so he's a bit old, but if he hits the open market, the Vikings might be interested. The Vikings also might be interested in the other fullback, Gilliam from Buffalo, who you saw leading Josh Allen in those tush pushes yesterday in Denver. But he's another guy who's a load, is set to be a free agent, and both Reichard and Gilliam played over 20% or more of their team snaps last year. So their teams trusted them to play a lot. If the Vikings want to bring back a fullback and they don't want to try to develop one from the college level, Gilliam and Reichard would be guys they might be interested in. They do a good job at that. So, but remains to be seen whether fullback is they're going to use a roster spot on a fullback, and if they're looking at it's going to depend on the quarterback and how confident they feel about their offensive linemen and tight ends as blockers, I think. So let's get back to the running backs and not the fullbacks so much about what the Vikings might do. Again, I think the running game was effective this year considering the quarterback play we had and all the offensive line juggling they did on all of that. However, I think it does have to get more explosive. The Vikings' longest run last year was 65 yards. Jordan Addison had that run, and we all know that Jordan Addison is not a running back. Aaron Jones had the second longest run at 31 yards. So they need somebody who's more of a home run hitter, who can be more explosive and get more explosive gains than what we saw last year with the Vikings. This year at running back at the free agency side of things, there are some interesting options that are available. You got Javonte Williams is set to be a free agent. Rico Dowdell is set to be a free agent again. Not only that, you got Breece Hall, Travis Etienne. There's a few others. Kenneth Gainwell is set to be a free agent as well. There's Kenneth Walker is set to be a free agent, although after last night's performance, I don't know if Seattle is going to be letting him go. But those are some interesting options there. For me, right now the Vikings salary cap situation, of course, is not very good. We expect them to get cap compliant and have money to be able to be active in free agency. But to me, Breece Hall would be the guy that I'd be very interested in bringing to the Vikings. He's the youngest of all of those guys we just mentioned. He's still only 24. He's just coming off his first 1,000-yard season. He's an excellent pass catcher. He is also a guy who is a home run threat. He once had an 83-yard touchdown run 2 or 3 seasons ago. For all of those reasons, and he played in, he's been productive, even though he's played in some really awful offenses with the New York Jets. So to me, he'd look great in purple. He'd provide you with that explosive home run threat, and he's young, and his best football is ahead of him. I don't know how much it's going to cost to sign him, and we don't know how much money the Vikings are going to be able to throw at free agents this offseason. And I think for all the reasons I mentioned, he's going to be fairly popular on the free agent market. But those are guys, Breece Hall would be my number one free agent target if I'm anywhere in the area where I can afford him. Kenneth Walker and Etienne would also interest me if I can't get Breece Hall, though again, don't know if those guys are going to be available, particularly Kenneth Walker, who I'd be surprised if Seattle let him go. But again, money talks, right? Maybe Walker's looking for a different opportunity. We just don't know. Rachaad White is another guy I forgot as well, who's also set to be a free agent. Not as appetizing as some of the other options I mentioned, but he's a guy who, again, is a very good wide receiver. Maybe not as explosive as I would like, but he's a guy who's used to working in a running back committee tandem type thing, and he might be amenable, and he wouldn't cost as much as I think Etienne or Breece Hall would or Kenneth Walker would if he hits the market. So those are some free agent options, and I know Ryan or Lance, who's ever commenting as Viking Uncensored, don't want to retread running back, but it's a possibility. And with some of those retreads I mentioned, particularly Breece Hall, I think you know what you're getting with those guys, whereas with a rookie, it's a little bit uncertain whether they can translate what they did in college to the pro level. However, at the college level, what might be of interest? Again, if we're looking for, I think we're looking for somebody who's fast, who can make guys miss an open space, who's a very good wide receiver in that area. And I think that, the top prospect is, of course, Jeremiah Love. Well, the Vikings, with their 5-game winning streak and the fact that they're now picking at 18, I don't think Love is going to be in play. He's been mentioned as a guy who's got sort of the same type of talent as Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson, and those guys have all been picked in the top 5, top 10 of the draft recently. Even though running backs are devalued, if you're the best, if you're a game-changing prospect, teams are going to pick you high. So Love's likely not going to be available at 18 unless he has a terrible combine and has terrible combine interviews, in which case that opens some questions about him as well. But, if I'm thinking the third round, maybe a fourth, if the Vikings can acquire a fourth, they don't have one right now. A couple of guys that fit the, I think the profile of can make you miss, play in a running back committee, are very good as a wide receiver. A guy like Damon Claiborne from Wake Forest, Jamari Taylor from Virginia. They're a bit on the smallish side, but they are guys who've been extremely productive at the college level, can catch the ball, and I think they're certainly going to be available in the third round or later. Now, if the Vikings want somebody a little bit higher end like that, Rhino just mentioned Jabarian Price. Washington's Jonah Coleman is another one. There's Nicholas Singleton from Penn State. If the Vikings want to target those guys, you're going to have to get them a little bit earlier. I think they're probably second rounders, maybe late first rounders in some cases. Emmett Johnson from Nebraska is another guy who's been extremely productive and would be somebody who's going to be, I think, fairly highly valued in the NFL draft. But the Vikings, if they want to target those guys, they might not get them in the third round or later. And I just don't know. We'll have to see what the Vikings, they haven't drafted a running back since 2023 when they selected Dwayne McBride in the 7th round. That didn't work out. I think this year they might, but I don't know if it's going to be really, really early. And if it's not really early, then a guy like Claiborne and Taylor would be the guys that I'd be more interested in because of the skills that they bring. Again, they're not the biggest guys, but they're fast, they're shifty, they've got great lateral movement, and they can catch the ball. And I think those are all things that the Vikings need from a running back. So some names we don't, I haven't dug into like the running back class a ton, but those are names that interest me. We don't know if they'll interest the Vikings. We'll get a better idea as the draft gets closer and we hear about those private visits and workouts that the Vikings have taken in. That usually gives you a bit of an indication on who the Vikings are interested in. Last year, they brought in Brashad Smith and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. And I think the Vikings were going to take one of those guys, but they got snapped up by other teams before the Vikings could draft them or pick them up as undrafted rookie free agents.
I agree. And I agree with Rhino. We got Mason for the beef. We could use a home run threat.
Yep. Yeah, that's what's missing in the running back room right now. And so
it is. Well, folks, that's our show today. And there was a bit of good news, a couple of items. We talked about Reichard. We talked about Chris Kuper not being rehired. It still got me smiling too. Now, hopefully KOC pulls the right head coach or offensive line coach. We'll see about that. We don't know. If there's any breaking news, Vikings First and SKOL will be on it. So we expect a normal week, so to speak. Tyler on Monday, Tyler on Thursday. We'll have more SKOL searches coming out. And then we're moving to Sunday starting next week, or actually starting this week. We will adjust the time accordingly so that you have time to watch, and it'll be a couple hours before the playoff games go. And then we'll, over the next few weeks, we'll adjust it, and then after the Super Bowl, we'll go to Sunday at 4. So, just to let you know. Got any last words here, Darren?
No, sirs. We'll see. I'd hate to be in a position where I'm cheering for the Rams, but I guess I am today.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The Rams coming from 80 degrees going into a wind chill of below zero. They're going to have some problems.
Mm.
And Ben Johnson, I found out today listening to Courtney, has not let them practice the team outside since December and not let them have heaters out there during practice. And that sounds like Bud Grant to me.
Mm-hmm.
So if it builds up a psychological edge when you have the boys from LA coming in, I'm curious to watch. And hopefully we'll have a better game than the Seattle game last night.
Yeah. I think one thing that normally, yes, it's supposed to be, I didn't look at what the temperatures are exactly at Soldier Field today. Dave, I'm sure you know that.
16 or 19 and the wind chill is just below zero.
Yeah, so not very good for a warm weather team, although slightly different. But last year, the Rams handled the very snowy and pretty cold conditions in Philly quite well, I thought, for a warm weather team. So we'll see how things go. But certainly, I don't love seeing LA get to the, be successful, but I certainly also don't love to see the Bears be successful.
Well, I understand that. It's just, it's going to be interesting story.
Aaron says,
then the poor Broncos.
Yeah.
What a game yesterday that was.
That was just a great football game. And, I really feel bad for Sean Payton that he's lost his quarterback and and his chances of getting to a Super Bowl probably too.
But hey, it is what it is. Bubba, have you ever not had a mustache or beard?
He was born
military. I did have the mustache, but it was a lot shorter and trimmed within regs, and I obviously didn't have the beard back then. So now the beard came into 2013 was when I first grew it. Kept it on ever since. So, but hey, it is what it is. Everybody, enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy the playoff football that's coming ahead with us, and be safe. What do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, and thanks for watching, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!